Hello. In this session, I want to talk a little bit about how EMDR heals the brain and changes those 5 areas of the brain that I discussed in the direction of health. So just as a brief review, in a past session, I discussed the 5 main areas of the brain impacted by trauma. These limbic areas of the brain, including the amygdala, so that smoke alarm of the brain that tells us when something is a threat or a danger. Remember, in trauma, what oftentimes happens is that area of the brain gets cranked up and it's too active. And this results in arousal and reactivity symptoms like hypervigilance, maybe problem sleeping, always feeling as though you have to be on guard for something. A lot of times these clients say, I have problems just relaxing. I feel like I can't really calm down and just relax. Then as we're moving up in those limbic areas of the brain, we come to the hippocampus, that explicit, declarative, autobiographical memory center. It's actually underactive during and after trauma, leading to encoding errors or filing errors of these memories, which can include processing errors in trauma memories, but also memories after the fact if we suffer from post-trauma symptoms and cortisol is flooding that area all the time, causing it to atrophy. So we have this cranked up, high activated amygdala and a lowly activated hippocampus. Then we also have issues with the insula, that area of the brain that allows us to feel our internal sensations, to feel into the body. And this area becomes dysregulated after trauma, where when it's overactive, it might be because we're re-experiencing those sensations and emotions that occurred at the time of the trauma. So it produces those re-experiencing symptoms. But then also sometimes it's lowly activated, and that's when we experience those numbing symptoms that are classic of PTSD, where we have a hard time connecting with ourselves or connecting with others or accessing our emotions. We also might be dissociative, where we feel like we space out or disappear. And during those times, we exit our bodies and exit the present moments, and we don't feel present. So we can have this dysregulated insula. Then if we move to these more top areas of the brain, the cingulate, that self-regulation center of the brain, we know that multiple components of this area are underactive, which compromises our ability to regulate thoughts and emotions. And that prefrontal cortex, right here, that thinking brain that's involved in executive functioning, also becomes very weak during and after trauma. And this can lead to difficulties with self and identity. Can mean that we can't connect as well with others, and we might have difficulty with problem solving or decision making or attention. So these are just some of the deficits that we see in trauma. So here's a question. What is EMDR doing? If the goal of therapy is always brain change, then we would want to know that EMDR is shifting areas of the brain in the direction of health. And it turns out that that's exactly what is happening in EMDR. So there's been a lot of different types of research, including neuroimaging studies, which have shown the impact of EMDR on the brain. And the results are very hopeful and very promising. One of the findings is that EMDR cranks down that knob of the amygdala, helping to reduce those arousal and reactivity symptoms. This is amazing because it can allow clients to feel a sense of relief, maybe a sense of internal peace that they've been lacking for a long time. Another thing that's been found with EMDR is increase in the hippocampus's activation, that memory center. Remember, it gets turned off or partially turned off during and after trauma. EMDR has been shown to awaken this area and to reactivate this area, which leads to better memory processing and allows for clients to reprocess traumatic memories to an adaptive resolution. In addition, EMDR has been shown to impact the insula as well, that area of the brain where we feel into internal sensations. It's been shown to help regulate this area and to quiet it down a little bit when there's trauma triggers. So when you're thinking about that traumatic event, after EMDR, we'll see less insula activation, which means that when you think about that traumatic event, it feels like it is just a memory. It doesn't feel as though it is happening in the here and now all over again. The result of that is that memories start to feel a little bit less dangerous. And when memories feel less dangerous, you actually avoid them less. And remember, avoidance leads to more severe post-trauma symptoms. So this is a really important finding. Also, there's been research showing that in the cingulate, that self-regulation center of the brain, that there's more activation after EMDR. Now, I'm not sure if this is because maybe with the amygdala cranked down, maybe it's just not suppressing these areas as much. Or it could just be that it's on its own just strengthening this area of the brain, leading to better emotion regulation, thought regulation, behavior regulation. You're better able to sift through irrelevant information and focus on what's important. Also, after EMDR, research has shown increased activation in the prefrontal cortex right here, both in the center midline areas. Remember, at your center, it's all about you. Thoughts about yourself, self-awareness. These areas in the center become stronger and more online. So you're a more aware person. You have increased self-awareness. You're more aware of the thoughts that you're having about yourself. You might have a stronger sense of identity. And research has shown that after EMDR, the lateral areas also light back up, which can be very helpful if you're trying to focus for a long period of time on a task, or maybe make decisions, or when you're communicating with other people and trying to connect with others. You might feel less of a sense of separation from other people. So EMDR, in short, changes those 5 areas of the brain that we know are impacted by trauma in the exact direction of health. And we think this is part of why EMDR techniques can be so powerful. So we know it changes those 5 areas. We also know that it seems to help memory reconsolidation. So when I'm talking about memory reconsolidation, I am talking about the hippocampus, but I'm actually also talking about the prefrontal cortex. So the theory behind why memory consolidation doesn't fully occur, why trauma memories remain unprocessed, is that at the time of a traumatic event, that hippocampus cannot fully activate, leading to errors in encoding. But that's not the entire story. For a memory to be encoded in long-term memory, it's first entered into working memory. And working memory, what that really is a collaboration between that memory center of the brain, the hippocampus, and also the prefrontal cortex. So when something happens, initially, that signal is sent to the prefrontal cortex for processing. And then the prefrontal cortex collaborates with the hippocampus to process and consolidate that memory into long-term memory. So when trauma memories are formed and they're unprocessed and they need to be refiled, what's happening is underactivation of not only the hippocampus, but of also the prefrontal cortex. Because remember, during the time of a traumatic event, the prefrontal cortex also goes offline. So having both of these structures lowly activated during a traumatic event leads to these memories remaining unprocessed. What EMDR does is it activates both of these areas of the brain at the same time to do a sort of redo on these memories, to reprocess them. So in EMDR, we're going to be having you pull memories out of your long-term memory storage, which is your hippocampus, pulling that file out. And then we're going to have you reprocess the memory by integrating in something called bilateral stimulation, which I'm going to talk in detail about in a future session. But we bring that memory out of that file and we activate at the same time the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, and we have them work together in real time, integrating in that bilateral stimulation, which will help the memory feel a little less distressing so that you can actually tolerate it. have these areas work together to reconsolidate the memory, and then we refile the memory back into the hippocampus in a more integrated, reconsolidated manner that feels less distressing. That's essentially what EMDR is doing. And in future sessions, I'll be going into detail about the steps of EMDR. Even backing out a level further from memories, we think that EMDR is working on entire neural networks. So neural networks have all these components. Memories are just one component of neural networks. We also have those sensations and the emotions and other memories, which might fall into some theme of a network, such as dog or sibling, or maybe thoughts about ourselves like I am a failure, things like that. We believe that EMDR is working not just on the memory, but on the entire network through shifting the memory, shifting the entire network so that it feels less scary and it feels like it's in the past. And it feels a little bit looser to where now we can integrate in other types of maybe positive memories or more adaptive information, which then further help that network to feel less scary and less dangerous over time. So in short, EMDR changes those 5 areas of the brain impacted by trauma in an adaptive way. It helps reconsolidate these trauma memories to alleviate post-trauma symptoms, and it shifts our networks to be more complex and more adaptive.